Mahabharata, Episode 2. When the Kaurava and Pandava princes reached the age of assuming royal responsibility, there was much speculation as to how Dhritarashtra would transfer power of the throne. On the compelling advice of Bhishma and Vidura, Dhritarashtra appointed none other than Yudhishthira as the crown prince. This inflamed the mind of Duryodhana. Both being deprived of power and then having to share it with the Pandavas pushed him to the edge of plotting to eliminate his cousins once and for all. His uncle Shakuni would prove to be a manipulative and powerful influence upon his thinking, and he was supported unconditionally by Karna as a result of Karna's loyalty to him. Together they arranged for a grand palace to be built in the kingdom of Varanavata. The palace was unusual in that it was built entirely of lacquer, a highly flammable material which was not evident to the eye. Their idea was to invite the Pandavas to visit the palace, and once they were there, a so-called accidental fire would take place, in which the cousins would perish. The Pandavas duly fell into the trap of accepting the invite, but Vidura got wind of Duryodhana's evil intentions and sent a coded warning to Yudhishthira with the words, "A forest fire cannot hurt a rat which shelters itself in a hole." When the Pandavas reached the palace, they quietly built a tunnel, set fire to the palace themselves, and silently escaped to the forest. News about the fire reached Hastinapura, and Duryodhana, who did not know that his plan had gone astray, assumed that the Pandavas were dead. He secretly rejoiced. Deeply aware now that the Kauravas would stop at nothing to ensure their demise, the Pandavas chose to remain in disguise in the forest as they wandered around. In their travels, they happened to come to the kingdom of Panchala, which was ruled by King Drupada. Mahabharata, Episode 2, continued. At the same time the Pandavas made their entry into Panchala, King Drupada had arranged a challenging archery contest to select a suitor for his daughter Draupadi. Draupadi's pure character was reputed across the land. It was her power to control the 5 senses that rendered her to those who knew her as a divine being. As Swami explains, those who can control the 5 senses can rule the world. Draupadi was endowed with such great powers of discrimination. The Pandavas disguised themselves as Brahmins and made their way to the scene of the contest. Many royal suitors tried to win the challenge, but none were able to succeed. Watching the proceedings from afar was none other than Krishna himself, cousin of the Pandavas, who resided in Dwaraka, and it is said he introduced himself to the Pandava brothers, having seen through their Brahmin disguise. The Pandavas were overjoyed to meet him after all they had been through. At the right time, Arjuna asked the royal court if a Brahmin could attempt the contest. With permission granted, Arjuna, with effortless ease, shot into the complex target. And, without a moment's hesitation, Draupadi followed Arjuna to the hut of the Pandavas in the forest. Mahabharata, Episode 2, continued. As the Pandava brothers were entering their hut, Mother Kunti asked, with her back turned to them, what they had brought home from the contest. "A prize," was the reply. Whereupon Kunti, having no knowledge of the nature of the so-called prize, asked them to share it equally. The brothers all revered the word of their mother as that of God itself, and could therefore not argue. Draupadi was duly consulted. With the same values as the Pandavas, she consented easily to marrying all 5 brothers. But her father was alarmed. It was then that sage Vyasa arrived and advised Drupada that in her previous birth, Draupadi had prayed intensely to Lord Shiva 5 times over for a good husband, and her prayers were now being answered in this birth. Vyasa also added that no other woman could invoke this example as an excuse to marry more than one husband. Drupada's heart was eased completely when, at the marriage ceremony, the Pandava brothers gave up their Brahman disguises to reveal their true royal identity. Yudhishthira told Draupadi, "You do not merely belong to us. You are the embodiment of primal energy." Mahabharata, Episode 2, continued. The kingdom of Panchala rejoiced, and news of the marriage of Draupadi and the Pandavas soon reached Hastinapura. The citizens of Hastinapura were overjoyed that their beloved Pandavas were alive. But they also suspected that the supposed death of the Pandavas must have been an assassination attempt. Rumors soon began to swirl, placing Dhritarashtra in an uncomfortable position. Thus, when the brothers returned to Hastinapura with Draupadi, Dhritarashtra gave them a triumphant royal welcome, together with Bhishma and Vidura. Given the growing rumors, Bhishma advocated that the best course of action would be for Dhritarashtra to divide his kingdom into 2 parts and hand over one of these to the Pandavas to rule, leaving the other half to the Kauravas, a suggestion which Vidura actively supported. Dhritarashtra yielded, a decision that only inflamed Duryodhana, who ensured that the portion of the empire the Pandavas received was dry, barren, and unproductive. Nonetheless, by sheer hard work and the help of Krishna, the Pandavas transformed the land they were allotted into a lush and prosperous country known as Indraprastha. The palace itself was famous for its grandeur and illusions. The walls of the palace were encrusted with precious stones. The Pandavas ruled their beautiful kingdom very wisely. Yudhishthira was a just and able leader. As such, the kingdom flourished with peace and prosperity, and the citizens of Indraprastha were happy under the Pandava rule. Such success, however, only drew the jealousy and anger of Duryodhana, who once again became consumed with hatred. This time, he rallied his supporters to go to war with the Pandavas. Karna, ever loyal to Duryodhana, was in full favor of a direct attack. But the crafty, intelligent, and strategic Shakuni, paternal uncle of Duryodhana, strongly advised against the idea of war. Instead, he said, "Let us use brains and not brawn. Entice them to a game of dice and leave the rest to me."